To kick off today's Flash Talks, please welcome the president of the Mellon Foundation, Dr. Elizabeth Alexander.
Good morning, buenos dias. Nice to see everybody. Nice to be here together. I am really happy to be here. I'm Elizabeth Alexander, in recognition with you of the amazing accomplishments of folks who are working in philanthropy, who identify as Hispanic, Latino, Latine, Latina, Latinx, Latinx, or of a certain generation, uptown New York City, Spanish. so just had to cover all the waterfront because things change fast. For today, I'll say Latine. And to celebrate the very important themes of corazón y poder that we are calling out at this annual conference. The expertise and perspective that you bring to your organizations, communities, and grantees is extraordinary. And so, as a fellow funder, I thank you for your work and honored to fulfill and further our philanthropic mission alongside you. As I thought about what I wanted to talk about today in this flash talk, because I am a poet in my beginnings and my forevers, I had to think about the two words, corazón y poder. And they brought to mind a small story that I want to share with you, a story from West Texas. This story centers on an indigenous community with deep ties to Mexican and Spanish American histories, and why telling our histories and stories is so important for us in philanthropy. In West Texas, in the town of Presidio, there was for many years an open space near Route 67. It looked like a small, simple mound of dirt marked off by a thin wire boundary. To some residents of Presidio, however, that space had long been a sacred site, one that is the final resting place for people from the Lipan Apache community. Among their descendants is a woman named Cristina Hernandez. As a child, Cristina and her family would make regular visits to this place known as Cementerio del Barrio de los Lipanes. Together, they would tend the graves of their ancestors, removing any litter or broken glass that might have accumulated and restoring scattered rocks, centinelas, so they could continue to provide spiritual and physical protection to their ancestors according to Lipan Apache tradition. Over time, city development and erosion had reduced the burial site to a small fraction of its former size and integrity. When the chairman of the Lipan Apache community saw what had become of it, he said, "I could hear the ancestors weeping. They were saying, do something." So Cristina and her community, working with city and county officials, helped transfer ownership of the cemetery back to the Lipan Apache tribe, raised awareness and formed community partnerships, and commissioned an indigenous-led architecture firm to lead the site's restoration and design. They had the vision, they had the plan, and they had the people. What they needed was a philanthropic partner, one that could help spark further resources and collaboration and ensure that the vision endured for future generations. In 2023, the Mellon Foundation became that partner. We made a one-year grant of $650,000 for the cemetery. And we're very happy that with our support, the work on this commemorative space has become even more potent and self-sustaining. And also very proud that this site of so much significance to a specific group of people is now a place where everyone can visit appropriately to learn these stories. Visitors today are invited to place a centinela stone onto an existing burial spot in acknowledgement of those cultural practices. And the stones are invitations to remember that each place matters. Each piece of the story is what makes up who we are collectively. Visitors are guided by interpretive signs in English, Spanish, and Lipan, and one of those signs says, "Walk in beauty, relatives and friends. May we continue to love each other." So this story is just one small example of the kind of narrative change that we're celebrating at this conference. And in part, because of how philanthropy can be helpful, the real narrative of a commemorative space, one that had been honored and held by its own community for centuries, even as it was overwritten and neglected in the broader region, is now fully known and fully preserved. In her great essay, The Site of Memory, Toni Morrison wrote of people who tried to reroute the Mississippi River and who failed to do so again and again. Because no matter how hard they tried to divert it, what happened? The river returned to its original path. Morrison wrote, "You know, they straightened out the Mississippi River in places to make rooms for houses and livable acreage. Occasionally, the river floods these places. Floods is the word they use, but in fact, it is not flooding. It is remembering. Remembering where it used to be." And here, Toni Morrison, "All water has a perfect memory and is forever trying to get back to where it was." Writers are like that, remembering where we were, that valley we ran through, what the banks were like, the light that was there, and the route back to our original place. It is emotional memory, what the nerves and the skin remember, as well as how it appeared. And a rush of imagination is our flooding. I really love that. So I think that, what can be so powerful about narrative change is like the movements of the Mississippi River, it is often the result of truthful remembering. To fortify that remembering is part of what I feel we can do. I believe our field bears a responsibility to lift up the stories of those who too often have been denied the opportunity to implement their own visions of story in public place. And this is a major reason that we are committed to supporting the work of Latina communities in our funding areas of arts, culture, humanities in public places, libraries, archives, higher education. We do it for many reasons, simply because it's right, simply because it's fascinating, simply because it's rich, simply because it's time, and because Latina people, cultures, histories have shaped this country since its inception and continue to expand, energize, and explore the possibilities of what our U.S. society could become. One that I think we hope together is ever more just, more inclusive, and more visionary than the one we have today. I am very proud to say that during my presidency, which began in 2018, Mellon has committed more than $150 million to Latina-serving organizations. The most dedicated portion of that comes from our Puerto Rico initiative, which was the first presidential initiative I developed as Mellon's leader. You see, I was gifted a little La Borinqueña, so I wear her proudly today in honor of that initiative. In the 5 years since our Puerto Rico initiative was launched, we have committed nearly $70 million to grantees both in the archipelago and across the diaspora, through grants supporting Puerto Rican scholarship, literature, culture writ large. And so there's much more to say about that, and I gotta keep it short, but it's a very beautiful initiative, and I urge you to learn about it from our website. The grants are really, really extraordinary. I could go on and on. As someone who started out as a writer, the Letras Boricuas Fellowship is just one little tiny piece, but it's the first writing fellowship for Puerto Rican writers ever in all history, and I'm just so, so proud that we did that, because there is no forward movement without our writers. There is no forward movement or knowing who we are without language, and so I'm particularly happy for that one small thing. I'm holding myself back. A broad and strategic commitment to Latina voices is consistent across all of our grant-making areas as well. Our higher learning program has committed tens of millions of dollars to Latina research and scholars throughout the United States, bolstering existing academic disciplines and driving new areas of study, many of which, as we know, are under siege today. Learning itself is being criminalized. So funding these knowledges that we can't talk about, our kids can't learn about in so many places, is crucial. Our public knowledge program is supporting libraries and community-based archives across the country as they preserve and lift up local Latina histories and storytelling. Book banning, as we know, is happening at an unprecedented rate. So preserving and supporting the knowledge, the infinite knowledge that is held in libraries, is very, very crucial work. Our Humanities in Place program funds urban and rural Latina heritage sites nationwide, hoping to tell a more complete story of these communities' lived experiences. And among many, many, many other grants, our Arts and Culture program recently supported the 4th cohort of the Latinx Artists Fellowship, a first-of-its-kind initiative that provides $50,000 in unrestricted funding to each of 75 Latina visual artists every year. With all of our grants, we are always attentive to the multiplicity beneath the canopy of Latinness, thinking always about questions of identity. To say a little bit about our Mellon, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. The Mellon Monuments Project, which is our largest funding commitment to date, is rooted in that same awareness and attention. This $500 million initiative, which I have led and envisioned for the last 4 years, seeks to transform the narrative of this country's history as it is told in our public spaces, one monument, one community, one story at a time. And so that's where the first story I told you about comes from. So monuments can be small burial mounds, and monuments can be enormous large things, and there are so many different ways that we believe that monuments take place, if you will. Right here in Chicago, a city I called home for many years, the commemorative landscape illustrates the need for a community-led approach. Despite, as we know, being home to some of the largest Latina and Black populations among U.S. cities, neither of these communities here in Chicago is adequately represented in Chicago's current monuments and memorials. It wasn't until 6 years ago that the city finally erected a statue to the great Chicagoan poet, my guiding light, Gwendolyn Brooks. That statue, in 2018, was the city's very first monument ever, forever, to an African-American woman. By empowering communities to memorialize the histories and experiences that more fully reflect who they are, we at Mellon are hoping to help folks tell a richer and more accurate American story for all. So in Chicago, we are currently funding the creation of 9 monuments across the city. They will be selected and designed by local residents and will include a landmark to Latina histories in Pilsen, highlighting the historic contributions of Mexican-American women to that vital cultural neighborhood. And another one, moving outside of Chicago in the Monuments Project, lies along the U.S.-Mexico border in Bisbee, Arizona, where we are helping to rehabilitate the historic Camp Naco, which was a key site during the Mexican Revolution and a cornerstone of the history of the segregated Black Buffalo Soldier regiments. And you know, one of the privileges and joys of this work for me is I am learning all the time histories that I didn't know. Once restored, Camp Naco site will also serve as a community hub for artists and historians exploring the multiple complex histories held in the Arizona borderlands. And a final example from the Monuments Project in Southern California stands in a flood control channel back to our rivers of the Los Angeles River. The Great Wall of Los Angeles, which I'm sure many people know. This astonishing mile-long mural envisioned and carried out by the great artist Judy Baca has stood for 50 years inside this LA waterway. We are supporting the construction of a new interpretive bridge that provides greater public access to the mural so that the people who live there can see and experience it, and so that local artists and community partners can continue to add more recent histories to the great multivocal landscape of Los Angeles. So all these grants tell the full story of who we are, plain and simple. They demonstrate how philanthropy can further narrative change across the country, change that is a result of accurate and inclusive storytelling, change that is driven for and by and within community. And I believe this work could not be more important now in a harshly divided country, where questions of who is the we that is America is under hostile contestation. But as the kids on our campuses say, we out here. Who we are as Latina people, and I use that we with love and solidarity as a person of color claiming common ground, even as we explore and express our specificity. Who we are is people with raíces in Europe, Africa, deeply in Native America. We must come together as people of color and understand that we are America. And when our spaces and humanities are pressed, we will insist on voice and support people doing the righteous work of rich storytelling. It is through grant-making like this that we at Mellon aspire to do our part to fulfill our collective purpose in philanthropy. And so, to conclude, it is through this support and so much else and so much that we're doing together that we continue to follow the imperative that now stands at the Lipan Apache Cemetery. That imperative, those words, walk in beauty, well, relatives and friends, may we continue to love each other. And so I say, may we continue to build more beautiful, more loving, more diverse, and most importantly, more just communities. And may we continue to walk together with corazón and poder today and for all the days to come. Thank you so much.